Hi, Professor Quinn. I'm Shannon Knutson,
I'm Courtney Bance.
and we will get our project pulled up here in a little bit. All right, I'm ready when you are, Courtney.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so for our service leadership project, we decided to work with JAPA. So a little bit about JAPA. It's been a part of the Des Moines community since 2008, and they focus mostly on helping the homeless in the area. It is a Christian-based program, but they only get donations from businesses and people locally. They don't depend on government aid at all. So they've, over the past 10 years, established some really solid relationships with community businesses to get the food and donations that they need to provide outreach to the homeless. So how JAPA got its name, they're on their website listed several reasons why JAPA is their name, but the main story stems from about the Bible. And Joppa is the name of a town. And in that town, there was a woman named Tabitha, and Tabitha was known for serving the needy and the homeless in that town. And she became so prolific that Joppa became known or became synonymous with the term refuge. And Joppa decided to use that term because of that story and also because it stems from a Hebrew word Yafo, which means beautiful.
So, JAPA's mission is to create communities of unconditional love, support, and hope for the homeless, and as they work together to prevent and ultimately end homelessness. So, their main way they do that is by filling in the gap between the homeless community and the general population of Des Moines. And they use outreach programs, housing development, and education to help facilitate that gap and close that gap ultimately between the two populations.
Okay, so a little bit more about the three main social issues that JAPA is addressing, or their three legs of their program. So the first of those is their outreach program, and this is kind of the one that JAPA is best known for. So what it is once a week, volunteers will go out, typically on a Sunday, and they have predetermined routes that they stop at, and they bring the homeless on those routes food, a hot meal, and then any other types of resources that they might need. And the second leg is dedicated to providing shelter for the homeless. And JAPA is working really hard on this particular portion of their program right now. And what it is they want to build these villages made up of tiny homes or little cottages. And it's a way to get people out of the elements and into a safe situation where they can start to like build up their funds, feel safe, and have a place to store their things. And those housing situations are meant to be sort of long term. So I think on their website it says like up to a year or more if needed. And the concept behind that is that this village becomes their own sense of community, and they help to keep that community going. So they have to do the upkeep on it. There's like a little town council within it. It's a really neat concept. The one we'll talk about it later, but there are some obstacles that they're having to overcome in order to make this a reality. The third and final leg of outreach that JAPA provides is education. And this is one that we didn't see a whole lot, but they have a program called JAPA Kids. And it's a program they use to educate young kids about homelessness and the root causes of that. They also try to teach these kids about what types of things that they can do to help those who are homeless and to ultimately end homelessness. So they're trying to start the conversation about this issue much younger in hopes that that can have some type of impact in the future.
So, specifically going into their outreach leg, every Sunday afternoon, there are groups of volunteers that are designated to those specific routes. And along these routes, there are stops and names of people that JAPA services weekly. And what they're doing is they're bringing food, clothes, toiletries, blankets, any other basic needs that these people might need who are living in the homeless camps in their tents or in shelters that they have built, their cars and under bridges, just kind of anywhere where they can set up their camp. And every person that is served by Joppa also receives a warm meal that is made or donated by a business or an individual that week. And after they receive their warm meal, then they can kind of do a grocery shopping and out of the backs of the cars of the volunteers, and they just kind of grab meats, vegetables, fruits, some desserts, and bread that they will want and need for eating throughout their week. They can also request any special needs that they're having. So, a big one was batteries that we saw, and that's actually a really short supply that they have in their donation. So, a lot of people will ask for batteries, socks, shoes in their specific size, and especially right now, propane heaters are a big one that people will request, and that's something that has to be donated. And they kind of do a special drive just for that come these winter months when they are out in those elements all day long and all night long. And so, but the most important aspect of the outreach, and this is something that the Joppa community really drives home and I think makes them different and special, is the connection and relationship that they create with these people in the homeless camps. So we talked to them, we tried to establish a relationship, we get to know them. You know, they talk to us about their plans for the winter or how they're trying to get, an apartment or a house or what their future goals are. And it kind of just shows them that people do care and people find that they are valued in this world. And I think that's very special that Joppa kind of created with this outreach program.
It was especially something that before we reached up the volunteers, we're here to see, show that you can talk to them. It's not just to show them that I really need. Other portion of their program is a little bit the support there for people who most homeless people are really too high and can give them some minute, which first sort of a way for them to climb out of homelessness. It's just a place to kind of keep their possessions. And again, I mentioned the tiny homes are meant to be affordable. We had discussed kind of the prices of some of the affordable income housing, and once they get the prices or put kind of these license agreement where they like a lot of the homeless people come and stay with them because they know what it's and the landlord happen and so anyway, Joppa wants to create these village community among themselves, involved and share their special skills within the village. So in the village itself, and there's meant to be community and there govern the tiny village. It's like a small town within a town to build these on the website for this park. You can donate your land, but they easier for them for just finding land near but your city. So the reality, and it's kind of they've been working on. I'll have some room to Courtney.
So the third leg, education, we talked about JAPA for Kids, and they are doing a program for the youth to learn about homelessness and what they can do to help. Um, so basically, they're just kind of introducing this concept to children and bringing them a sense of what it like what these people are going through and how they are living and their living conditions and just it helps them understand the cause and to maybe help prevent the cycle from continuing. So they're really trying to prevent future generations from becoming homeless. And I think this is a really great action by JAPA, and it's almost proactive in their servant leadership by trying to prevent and getting down to those root causes and helping these kids understand. Now, another aspect of this is that it's also introducing, the concept of volunteering and getting new opportunities and experiences for these kids that they might not have known about prior to this program. And what it talked about on their website was creating a sense of satisfaction and motivation for these kids, because most people want to make a difference in their community and they think it's really awesome. And this is a great way to kind of facilitate that experience and opportunity is by getting involved early, and then hopefully you're also preventing that cycle from continuing, or at least they might know more resources and they'll just get better informed and have more knowledge around this issue. Because I I feel like a lot of times is, people are ignorant to what's going on in their community, and it's not because they don't want to know, it's just not always readily available. So I think JAPA getting the word out and understanding and having these kids understand, what is truly going on in their community and how they can help really only just builds a better sense of community in that way.
Okay, Japa offers, which includes getting the food shipments from stores and load those partook in. So the day before people go out and distribute the food and resources, all of it has to be prepared and organized. So Courtney and I went in and we had already kind of figured out how out, and I think that there was 15 routes, different routes that Japa went on, and you have to distribute the food equally among all of the tons of cooler chicken breasts and like throwing them into each cooler and making sure they have even and then doing the same thing for everything. So all the bread, all of there's lots of data, each equal items. So that all the program object by. And so what that involves a group, usually it's 2 cars, different campsites that are along supplies. And Courtney kind of already mentioned, you give them a hot meal, and then like the tried opens or the pickups are a mini grocery store where they that certain car and so really engaging with the people. Anything you want to add to that, Courtney?
No, I think you got that really covered.
Okay.
So, the synopsis of our involvement, the outreach, I thought gave us the best opportunity, to really see how these people live day in and day out and what their issues and struggles are. And I really enjoyed the outreach as well because it gave me that time to interact, and it showed me how important building trust is among this population because they they don't have that shelter, and we heard about a lot of robbings, and so they have a hard time trusting anyone that comes into that camp that they don't know. And so when you yelled Joppa, people would know who you were, and they knew that you were honest and trusting. And so I thought that was really interesting how Joppa's built that name up, and people know who they are, or at least have heard of them, and will trust these random strangers coming into their camp, all because of one word. And I found that very moving. And at the same time, it was also along the outreach kind of difficult to see and know that at the end of the day I get to go back to my home, but this is their life, and this is what they have to deal with. So I found it very eye-opening and probably the most impactful. The cooler prep and the food rescue, it was really interesting to see the businesses that donated to Joppa. So, Fresh Time Market and Trader Joe's were probably the two main ones that gave a lot of meat and vegetables and a lot of pre-made meals for them. And Hy-Vee also donated a ton of bread. But what was really interesting was that no matter how much food that was donated, it just never seemed to be enough. And that was also really eye opening because, I mean, we spent hours putting away food, and then to go out on the outreach and see that it just doesn't cover what they really need, really kind of plays a special part in how important donations are for them. And, you know, also to see how much time and work goes into these preparations for Sunday. We only did them once, but these volunteers are doing them weekly or monthly basis, and you're spending hours in the preparation and the thought process behind it, and making sure that everyone's getting the right amounts, because if you go out on that outreach and you run out of food, those people go without that week, or they have to find another alternative source. So it was very interesting, and in the aspect of understanding what actually goes into these preparations.
Courtney.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what happened.
I don't either.
We're still broadcasting. Let's go back. Sorry, Professor Quinn. I think we can maybe just keep going with the slide that you were on. Did you conclude it? You were sort of there, like how much time it takes to prep for Sundays. Hello?
Yes, I did. Can you?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
On to project objectives.
Yep. Okay. So we had set aside our 3 main objectives before doing this project, and some of them were easier to evaluate than others. The first one was we wanted to really see the impact of homelessness on people's development, and in particular, Erikson's stages of development. So we weren't we weren't quite successful with this just because we only got to see certain individuals for such a short amount of time that it's unlikely we got a full view of their entire life and where they're at in developmental stages. It was also really hard. Like our conversations were, I don't know, anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes with certain people. And so others are more willing to share their challenges that they're going through or their successes. And so it's really just, we didn't get a very clear picture of how people were affected. But what we could kind of assume, I guess, were like there's 3 main stages of Erikson's development for adults that we thought could be impacted by homelessness. And so the first is intimacy versus isolation, kind of for the younger adults. And one of the things Japa kept explaining to us is that being homeless can be very isolating, and you don't necessarily trust the people who are living near you. And they had stressed that every time we went out on an outreach that it is an opportunity for them to feel more human and to feel more connected to others and to feel less isolated. So we were maybe thinking that that could be a challenge for homeless people, is to get through that stage of development because they are so isolated. So another stage in Erikson's development is the generativity versus stagnation. And what we did notice, and especially the second outreach we were a part of, was that usually the older homeless people, so I mean, not old, but in their 50s or 60s, explained to us how they had been helping others since it had been getting colder. They were teaching people who maybe haven't been experiencing homelessness for a long time about how to best insulate their tents, or how to keep their tents up when their poles broke, or how to extend the life of a candle using cardboard strips and covering those in wax and heating them. So they had just explained and it seemed like it made them feel very good, as if like they were, they weren't being stagnant in their life, that they were helping others who were homeless using their own skills. So then the last stage that we discussed in our paper especially was this idea of having integrity versus despair. And we did meet some older adults, so people who are 60 or older, in the outreach, or we heard them being discussed. So people who are homeless, maybe their parents who had been out with them. And we can imagine, and we didn't actually have any contact with people like this, but we can imagine how being homeless might make people feel more despairing, because they didn't really get to live a life of their own choice because of other circumstances out of their control. So they lost a job, they had an illness, they had unforeseen payments, they, for any reason, became homeless and weren't able to fulfill their own, life goals. So we thought that very easily people who are homeless might be more into the despair portion of that development.
There was guy that actually chose to live where he lived, and he wanted to be off the grid, and he actually made this entire shelter, almost home, back behind this business, and he created his own water filtration system, which I found very interesting. But that was his own choice, and that's what he wanted. And so I mean, I'm sure there are some people that are like that, but I would probably agree with you that most people don't choose to do this kind of living.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Continuing on.
So we really
Uh,
wanted to make sure that we got to interact with this community and these people that are a lot different from our perspective and our way of life. And also help the interaction process between it. And I noticed a really big difference between our first outreach and our last outreach and how I was more comfortable interacting with them. I didn't really know the first time, what to say to them, how to create that kind of small talk conversation that they're just seeking because they don't have, much human interaction on a daily basis. And I found it so much more relieving and easier because at the end of the day, they're just humans. They're just like us. They just live different lives. And so I thought that was also very empowering. And it truly is a lot about your mindset. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But on my first outreach, I got yelled at by a lady and told me that she didn't want small talk and she didn't care about us. She just needed help. And it almost broke my heart more because I wish, not necessarily for my sake, but I just wish that she had a better outlook because I think she blamed a lot of issues on other things. And she was the only one, though, out of all of the people that we met, she was the only one that actually made excuses and blamed us for things, which was kind of disheartening because she was one of the first people that I met on this. But our last outreach, they were so inviting and they were so willing to just talk to us. We talked to a lady probably for 20, 30 minutes.
mhm.
They're like, we need to actually get going to these other places. But it was so nice and refreshing just to see, that they're no different from us. And they just crave that human intention or attention and interaction at the end of the day. And they just want to have value in this world.
Mhm. So for our final objective, it was more related to the medical field and health, just because both Courtney and I are in the BSN program at Mercy. So we wanted to gain an understanding about the specific medical needs of the homeless and kind of understand how that impacts them because they can't get to healthcare. A lot of them don't have healthcare or they lack the transportation to receive it. So um, and we mostly got this through interacting with the other volunteers, not necessarily like with individuals that were homeless. But one of the main factors in people not getting medical care is that they obviously can't get there. They don't have any money to follow the treatment regimen. So even if they do go to a hospital to get treatment, they can't comply with it because they don't have the money to buy their medications. And then another interesting conversation that I had with a volunteer, the first outreach, because several of them had been asking Courtney and I if we were going to administer flu vaccines because they had seen Mercy students do it in the past. And I said no because that wasn't part of our project. Um, but they had Mercy volunteers with them to give flu vaccines, and only one person ever said yes to it. And I asked him why, and he just said that there's so much distrust among the homeless of the medical profession, and they're not trustworthy. Like they're not trustworthy in the homeless person's eyes. Um, and I just thought that that was so eye opening. Like we're going into this profession, and most people see it as one of the most trustworthy professions that there is, and yet these people who are homeless don't. They see it exactly the opposite way. Um, so that was kind of eye opening. Um, and again, like that's coming from another volunteer, but I thought that it was worth mentioning.
Okay, so relating to this to concepts that we had within class, going with Greenleaf's time principles, We really thought that awareness was probably one of the most important things that with this social issue is because people just are not aware of how big of a problem and an issue this is in Des Moines, Iowa. And honestly, I knew that there was an issue from just living in the downtown area, but I didn't realize how many people Joppa actually service on a weekly basis and how many people walk into their doors. And so I thought, Joppa does a great job about creating this awareness and trying to figure out the best plan of action for this social issue because they're they're in those camps and they know what's going on. And I find that very empowering for Joppa. And with the listening aspect, it goes back to what Joppa drives home every single week is that we need to create this connection with these people. And so we need to listen to their needs and their requests and the fact that they can make special requests and we can't promise anything, but the fact that we write these things down and we truly just listen to their issues that they're having on a weekly basis or even their triumphs. I mean, so many of them are willing to share like what they have going well in their life, and just to have someone listen to them and to be heard is very empowering for these people. And um, Joppa obviously has a big emphasis on empathy. They don't judge anyone that they service, and it doesn't matter what their situation is or how they got there or how long they've been in that situation. Joppa's there to help regardless. And they just show such great empathy for these people and help them feel valued and loved unconditionally no matter what.
Mhm. I think it's important to mention too, a lot of people are homelessness because they maybe have some mental instability. And Joppa, the volunteers did such a great job of just treating those people who like clearly have some issues going on. Joppa just did a great job of treating them with compassion and empathy and not treating them differently because of it.
Mhm.
So to continue on with Greenleaf's principles, Joppa is deeply committed to the growth of others. So specifically the growth of those who are homeless. So Joppa wants everyone that they serve to know that they're deeply loved and supported. And that's part of the reason like they go out every single week, rain or shine, in the winter, and they try to support them in all avenues. So they give them food, they give them socks, clothing, they give them shelter, and Joppa says if these people can make it into their warehouse to their office building, like they'll help them get jobs, they'll help them get government IDs. They want to help them in every single way possible. So doing all of this, hopefully, those that Joppa serves understand that they are deeply valued as humans. Then another connection that we could make to Greenleaf's principles was the idea of building community, and this goes back to Joppa's housing program. So wanting to make those villages of tiny homes in order to help people basically transition out of homelessness and end homelessness ultimately. Okay.
So, connecting this to Aristotle, Aristotle talked about how true happiness is self sufficient and that you need to understand the greater purpose to why someone does what they do. And I found that the volunteers at Joppa 100% know that this is what happiness is for them because you can just see it when they are out on the outreach or they're doing the cooler prep or even the cleanup afterwards. Like this isn't necessarily the most fun thing, especially on the outreach when it's cold and it's raining or it's super hot and you're sweating. You know, that is true happiness because they understand the greater purpose of what they're doing and how they're touching people's lives. And I find that so uplifting that this community of volunteers, every single person that we met exuded this and how they help fulfill others' lives with meaning through their actions is really inspiring, and kind of it makes me want to continue to volunteer there after this project. And they were super inviting and welcoming to everyone because they know how important their work is.
Mhm. I think this is something that sets Joppa aside from other programs for people who are in a low socioeconomic status, is that they actually like travel to the homeless people. Like that action in itself is so unique
Mhm.
for any type of social program. And so I just think like they're definitely doing the right thing, and
Yeah.
it's the best for those who are homeless. So I think I know Aristotle says that true happiness is sought through actions usually. And Joppa is all about action. That's the main thing that they do is their outreach program. So they're doing,
Mhm.
which I think is really cool. So comparing our project to some more topics that we covered during this semester is the idea that those who are homeless, most of the people that were homeless that we encountered really had a growth mindset. And along with that, kind of exemplified how they were anti-fragile. So it seemed like, especially the second outreach we were a part of, the people that we had talked to were so happy to share their plans for the future with us. So what what things that they were currently working on. So it was like building up their shelter, or they were going to insulate their tents, or they were getting an apartment, or they got a new job. Um, so they're always looking for more and for growth and to improve. They hardly ever made an excuse for their situation. It wasn't anyone else's fault. It was this thing happened, and this is what I'm doing about it. It seemed like they were controlling their own situation, and a lot of I remember talking to a woman. The woman we talked to for about 30 minutes on the second outreach was just saying like, "Yeah, I could be sad and I could be upset, but where would that get me?" Which is like a true example of growth mindset. And uh, just relating this to how they're anti-fragile, they have been dealt some pretty rough things. Their day-to-day living is so different from what most people experience that they have to be stronger in order to survive. They have to learn from adversity and to be better. And so some of the tricks I know we already talked about, like insulating tents within a tent, using cardboard, using styrofoam. They would rip apart cardboard and dip candle wax all over it and light that to stay warm because it burns brighter and hotter and longer. Like just the crazy things that they can do to persist and to get better was insane. Like things that I would have never thought about because I've never been put in that situation.
Yeah, and I think the lady that had been um, in her situation for 10 plus years, she showed us that utility tool, and it was just wire.
Mhm.
And she like had molded it, and it was actually on her zipper, but she said this is the best thing that you could have, and you can use it for so many things. And she was just so willing to share all of that with us, and I was so impressed on just how much she knew by just trying to survive, and that
Mhm.
just only made her stronger. And I was very impressed by that.
Yep. Well, even she mentioned, like, taking care of her feet had to be priority for her. She
Hmm.
said she uses them so much, they're, like, her number 1 transport, and so she had talked about how she would, shove things between her toes to keep them from, like, deforming on one another, like, it was just, like, things I really would never think about. It was
Yeah.
really mind-blowing.
Mhm.
Do you wanna take this next one, Courtney?
Yes. So, Catherine McCauley, as we learned, was dedicated to serving the poor, specifically women and children. She tried to find them shelter for those abused women and girls, but this goes hand in hand with what Joppa does. They are serving the poor and providing them with food and resources. And Joppa is currently fighting to build that community of tiny houses to help that transition out of homelessness for so many people. And they they both just show how they are servant leaders because they are wanting to foster growth and sheltering those, like that population that needs it the most. And
Mhm.
you can just see how much Catherine McCauley and JAPA as an organization kind of go hand in hand, and what they're trying to do to better their community as well as this underserved population in the community.
Right. I think the two main tie-ins there are like food and resources and then shelter. So like Catherine had made her house in Dublin on
Mhm.
Bagot Street and
Yeah.
she would shelter those who needed it. And Joppa is trying to do the same thing by sheltering those who need it.
Mhm.
Okay, so finally, comparing leadership project to Mercy's core values. So the first one, knowledge. I think Joppa has a really unique perspective on the homeless situation in Des Moines because they are the one visiting the camps. They would literally walk into a camp yelling Joppa so people know it's us. And you see what's going on there. You see the tents, you see the trash, you see the people. You really have a true insight to what those people are going through and then what they need. Um, so for Mercy's core value of integrity, Joppa has been around since 2008, and it's so clear, like Courtney had mentioned, when you yell out the name Joppa, people immediately drop their guard because they know you're a person that they can trust. They may have never met you in their life before, but you're trustworthy. You're bringing them goodness. You're bringing them shelter. You're bringing them food. And I think the fact that Joppa goes out there every single week and they do it in every kind of weather, that they've shown that they're very trustworthy and they have shown their integrity and their commitment to these people.
So, JAPA obviously exudes compassion. Their volunteers are so happy to share in these people's joys and their sorrows. You know, I talked about how so many people are willing to tell us how what they have planned for the future and what's going on and what's working, and but they're also willing to sit there and tell us, you know, what things that they need and how can we help and how can we better serve them. And you can just see in the volunteers' actions that they really do have compassion for these people, and that sense of trusted communication that is dependable from month to month is huge, because they kind of get into this routine of seeing the same people over and over again, and they develop these relationships as well as just a great communication flow. Like I remember Joppa talking to us about getting their phone numbers so we could just talk to them throughout the week and let them know that we're there for them. And I thought that was actually really a great idea and super compassionate. And their commitment to excellence is just astounding to me. They always are wanting to improve the way that um, the way they do things, the way they run outreach, the better donation system, and obviously what we talked about, building that tiny house village to help get those people out of homelessness. And I mean, they're just always trying to raise that standard of quality that they're providing to these people. And the fact that they're trying to educate future generations is also a really big commitment to excellence and improving those standards of quality, because they're trying to end homelessness and prevent the cycle from continuing.
Okay, so our recommendations for any future projects. We thought that since Joppa is focused so much on now developing these tiny home villages, that could be an area to focus on, because that would have a great impact on actually trying to end homelessness altogether. We did think that Mercy students maybe could go out and administer flu shots or do health screenings. So something that was a little more tied in with the health sciences. And then this one was kind of something we both thought of when we were preparing the foods to go out for outreach, is that we wouldn't know how to cook hardly any of these foods. And tons of the food they were being given was like raw chicken.
Mhm.
And so just making sure that like these people know good ways to cook their food and like to cook it in a way that's safe for them to eat. that won't make them sick. And then a lot of the vegetables were like, some of them are strange vegetables because they're things that don't get bought up in the stores, so they get donated. So like 1 week we were there, we had so many Brussels sprouts, like tons and tons and tons of Brussels sprouts. And so like I don't even know how to cook those in my kitchen. So having somebody learn how to cook those over a campfire is kind of, I don't know, next level. We were thinking that that would be something cool to kind of build a new sense of community and get them involved in a different way or a different interaction. So making sure that the food also doesn't go to waste if they don't know how to cook it, then you know that just lends itself to being thrown away. So then we just have our references. That is our presentation. All right. Thanks for your listening, Gwen.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.